How many of you have ever had a role model? I imagine most of us have at one time and another. There are two that stand out in my mind that I always remember. One is a pastor and a family friend named Gene Mitchell, a person who I've always, I think he's had known me for longer than I can even remember. Literally, he's the pastor who baptized me. And his example has always been just a really powerful one of how a pastor should be. Now, one of my other role models growing up was the single greatest player to ever touch a basketball, Magic Johnson. Now, a few of you who know me well might think, but Pastor, you don't like basketball. Well, then this is true now, but it wasn't so true ages ago. I actually have 3 trophies sitting on my mantle, 2 regular season victories, highest win total in the regular season and 1 from winning the playoffs, that I'm rather proud of. And then I played church ball back east, which is nothing like church ball out here. Church ball out here is asking for pain. Church ball back east is only asking for bruises. Now, so way back in my childhood, I thought Magic Johnson was great. Everybody liked Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan was all right, but Magic Johnson, he was something special. The guy was 6'9", but he could play point guard, he could play center, he could do anything you needed him to do on the basketball court. I even have a magazine with his autograph on it, which I'm rather proud of, and I really need to get a frame for. Now, it's not uncommon for kids to have athletes for their role models. This is something that happens over and over again, but it has its own problems. Another basketball player, a fellow named Charles Barkley, infamously said once that 1 million guys can dunk a basketball in jail. Should they be role models? Now, see, back in the 80s, it took a lot for people to make the news. We didn't have the 24-hour news cycle that we have to deal with now, where they have to fill the time somehow, so they find anything they can. So for something to happen to bring an athlete down in popular opinion, it had to be something fairly major. For example, I still remember the press conference when Magic Johnson announced that he was HIV positive. I don't remember why it was a big deal. And when I was little, I didn't understand. I had no idea what HIV was. I had no idea what any of that was. I just knew that a guy who was my role model did something that people were disappointed about. In the past month or so, though, a lot of athletes have fallen from grace. Ray Rice, Adrian Peterson, Greg Hardy, Jameis Winston, Hope Solo. Some of you might know at least a couple of those names. All of them have done things that have now come out in the media, and it kind of wrecked their status as role models. In Adrian Peterson's case, it was actually mildly amusing. Not long after the news of his indictment broke, there was a big article in something about what an excellent role model he is. Now, to be fair, there are many athletes who don't do anything wrong and actually would be pretty good role models. But when we put any human on a pedestal like this, it's pretty much inevitable that we will be disappointed. Eventually, our human role models will disappoint us because they are human. That's kind of how it goes, unfortunately. This is why when Paul is trying to show the church in Philippi how to act, he doesn't use himself as an example. He doesn't use Peter. He doesn't use any of the disciples. He says your attitude should be like Christ Jesus. And that's a pretty good example. My favorite post-communion prayer mentions Jesus as a model of the godly life. But when Paul sets up the attitude that we should mirror, the attitude of Christ Jesus that we should be modeling, it's a pretty tall order. He says that Jesus, even though he is by nature God, didn't think that it was anything to strive for to be like God, but instead became a servant. He became obedient to death on a cross, and then when he was raised up to the highest, God put him up. When he was raised from the dead, God put him in the highest place possible so that when his name happens, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that he is Lord. And so, following that example, we should work out our salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in us to will and to act according to his good purpose. Whew. Now, this is quite an understatement, but one of the things that makes Jesus such a good role model is he didn't just sit back and feel good about faith. He went out and he did God's will. It's his humility and obedience together that Paul is praising here. And as Lutherans, we sometimes have a hard time with this. You know, we always like to think that, oh yeah, we're Lutheran, we were baptized, we were confirmed, we're saved, and we're good. Job's done now, right? Even if we don't think that actively, we still kind of have that in the background because we've been told for so long that we are saved through faith, by grace through faith, and not by works, lest anyone should boast. Right? I mean, how many times has a Lutheran pastor said that verse to you? How many times have they said the verse immediately afterwards? Which reads, to do the good works that God has planned in advance for you to do. See, our expression of faith came about in a time where people were saying that if you do this, this, and this, and this, then God will be more happy with you. If you climb this many steps, you can get granddad out of purgatory. If you buy this indulgence, you can get grandma out of purgatory. Now, who wouldn't take that deal? They might not pay for themselves to get out of purgatory, but they'll definitely pay for grandma and grandpa, right? Now, because Lutheranism sprung out of that kind of climate, that climate where Luther spent so much time saying, no, this is free. Jesus paid for this. You don't have to. We get twitchy when we start to talk about works because we misunderstand the role of works in faith. We misunderstand that it's not works that scores us points. It's works that happen because we're following Jesus. It's works that happen because we're following his example, because he is our role model. That's why when Paul writes that we're to work at our salvation with fear and trembling, we're called to show the world our faith by what we do, according to God's purposes. When Jesus is really our example, when Jesus is the one whose attitudes we are trying to mirror, we won't have to do good works. We'll want to do good works. Not to earn points, not to make God love us more, because he already does. It's just because it's what Jesus did. It's because it's what Jesus did. And he is who we should strive to be like.